Alright guys, let's get started. First of all, a couple notes. The webinar is being recorded, and Bob will hopefully have this up on YouTube. Also, this is not a sales pitch. I'm not going to sell you on anything. My goal here is to show you some of the cool things you can do with PowerShell and Office 365 and how it'll make your management a lot easier from a scripting environment. We're going to take a look at how to deal with this. So our agenda for today, we're going to look at the prerequisites, so basically what you need to do this. We'll look at signing on to the Office 365 system from PowerShell, a couple company information and subscription commandlets, and we'll start doing some work with some users groups and roles. Keep in mind that this presentation is only going to focus on Office 365's core management. I'm not going to get into the Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, or Link Online specific commandlets. Those are available elsewhere, and there's enough details for them to be another webinar. So if you want to hear more on those, make note of that. We'll give you an email address to pass on the information to us. So first, let's look at the prereqs. In order to be able to manage your Office 365 account through PowerShell, you need to use at least Windows 7 or Windows Server 2008 R2. You need to have PowerShell on the .NET Framework, at least minimum version 3.5.1. There are also two different things that you'll need to download depending on your operating system. If you're running a 32-bit or a 64-bit, I've provided links to both in here. You need the Microsoft Online Services Sign-In Assistant. You also need what used to be called the Microsoft Online Services module for Windows PowerShell. Its current name is Windows Azure Active Directory module for Windows PowerShell. I've included both names because you may see it as the old name in some spots or in the new name in others. It is one and the same. The module that we're going to be working with is called the MS Online module. And once you install it, you'll notice that it'll run, or it'll create what they call the Windows Azure Active Directory module for Windows PowerShell shortcut. And it just looks just like the PowerShell stuff. It opens a command that automatically does this import module for you. Now, if you're in PowerShell for your general scripting things, just do a simple import module MS Online, and then that'll work for you. And connecting is as simple as connect MSOL service. So let's take a look at this. Okay, and everything that I'm going to show you from the command you can actually do in the portal, but if you're finding yourself using PowerShell now, it might help just to stay in the PowerShell command. But here's the portal, and you can see the commands there. This is what we're going to look at. We're going to take a look at first importing the module MS Online. Now what I'm running here is the PowerShell ISE. And I'm using this for demo purposes just so that you can see the commandlet and then what it looks like when it runs. Just easier because there's it's easy to have that script there. In the ISE, if you highlight a line and press F8, it'll run just your selection. So that's exactly what I'm doing. And then I want to connect. So now I can say connect with my Simplex-IT credentials. And then the prompt comes back. Are you seeing, you guys at the moment should be seeing the PowerShell. You guys are not seeing the PowerShell window? No one has started video. No video. Okay. For For those of you, okay, I was going to say, for those of you looking for video, I am not running a video. This is just straight what I'm presenting. So you guys should see PowerShell. You should see the commandlets up top. With a lot of green stuff right now, actually. There we go. If you don't see it, you might need to show the stage. Okay. Okay. All right. So this is how simple it is now that we've got everybody back on track. This is how simple it was to connect. All I had to do is type this connect MSOL service, and it went ahead and showed it did the get credential prompt and put the credentials in automatically. And if you want to put your credentials in there, if you do a dash credential, you can do it that way as well. All right. Next, we're going to take a look at the company information. So we can take a look at company details here. Again, I'm just going to highlight this and press F8. And I only wanted to show a select number of fields here to give you an idea that you can filter out what you're looking at. However, if you want to see just how many properties you have to work with for looking at your company information, if you run it through get member, that will tell you all the different fields. So you can see where your technical notification emails are going, for example, or your marketing notification emails. This is kind of important when you do want to find out more about Office 365 from the marketing side or technical side. We go back to our presentation. So that's list company information. Now you can update your company contact information with this set MSOL company contact information commandlet. This will allow you to set the technical and what they call their marketing notification emails contacts. For example, you might also want to take a look at, okay, we got some people who are mentioning that we're looking at the slides are downloading, so I'm going to hold off a minute. While the slides are downloading for viewing, so we just took a look at the set MSOL company information. There's a slide now for directory synchronization. So if you have directory synchronization turned on or turned off, some people may not necessarily know that. And so you can use this get MSOL company information and check its directory synchronization enabled to see whether it's enabled or not before you do this set MSOL dir sync enabled. Subscription information, you can see get MSOL subscription. It'll tell you the SKUs that you have and the number of licenses and whether it's enabled or not. Now get MSOL account SKU, the reason why I mention this is because we're going to refer to this a little bit later, but this will show you your licenses and how they're being used. So you can see from this particular screenshot that we have 250 Enterprise Pack licenses and 19 were being used. Okay. Now we're going to start looking into the user information. So we have this get MSOL user commandlet, and what it'll allow us to do, it'll allow us to take a look at our users who are tied in Office 365. So I am going to switch over to our PowerShell so that you can see what we're working with. So I've got a question about, will the slides and command list be listed on the blog? I can definitely blog about this and have this posted up on the Simplex blog. And as Bob mentioned, yes, the meeting will also be on YouTube. Okay. At this point, you should see the PowerShell window. I'm going to try to minimize switching back and forth between PowerShell and PowerPoint, just to make it a little bit easier for you guys as well. So we want to take a look at the MSOL user. Let's take a look at the people who we have here. Now, for this particular demo, I've created a bunch of people with the last name Jones. There's nobody at Simplex with the last name Jones yet, so that's why I'm able to get away with that. But just so you understand why I'm using it, this is for demo purposes only. So what I did is I get MSOL user, and I only care where the display name is like Jones. Something to note, in this particular demo, I am using PowerShell 3.0, but you can also use PowerShell 2.0. So the syntax you're seeing for the where, that's PowerShell 3.0. If you have any questions on the 2.0 syntax, please feel free to ask in the chat. So this will give me a particular set of users that I want to work with. Now let's say I want to create a new user. Creating a new user is simple. We just do this new MSOL user, give it the user principal name and a display name. Notice when I create a user, the password is automatically generated. So that way, when you create a massive group of users, it'll create initial passwords for you. And they'll all be unique. And we will see that here in a little bit. Now when we set licenses, one of the things I've noticed is it wants the usage location field to be set. The usage location field is the two-character country code. And so what we do to change any user properties is we use set MSOL user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab any user whose last name is Jones, because I just recently created them, and we want to set their usage location to the US because they're all here in the US. So I'm going to run that. Now that prompt came back. I'm going to scroll this up a little bit more. So at this point, we've created users, but we haven't assigned licenses to users. Assigning a license is fairly easy. As I had mentioned earlier, there was that get MSOL account SKU, and this is where that comes into play. So we need to have a variable to get the SKU, and then what we're going to do is we're going to get the user, whose names are Jones, and we're going to give them a license. In this case, since we only have one set of licenses, it's just SKU.account SKU ID. So the way you do this is set MSOL user license dash add licenses. I'm going to run these two lines. Okay, so now we've got licenses assigned to them. Best way to take a look at that. If you noticed up here when we created Tom Jones, over here on the far right, it said is license is false. But if we run this get MSOL user where display name like Jones, you'll see now there is license are true. At the bottom here's Tom Jones, and so now we've assigned a license. It's as simple as that. So if you're importing a group of users be it you're just setting up Office 365 or maybe HR has hired a bulk of users and you need to add them, this is the way you would do it, and this is the way you would assign their licenses. Now maybe your company has a default password for your users to start with. Then we would want to use this set MSOL user password. Again, I'm going to do this for all the Joneses because I just created them this morning. And I'm going to say that their new password is change me with the 4s and 3s. The reason why I put out null is because if I don't, it's just going to spam the password for each user. So when I run that, at this point, that set MSOL user password is going to set it to their default password. Now keep in mind that this is still only a temporary password. When your users go to log in, they're still going to be prompted to change your password. And if you want to do this, notice here I'm doing this get MSOL user, and that whole word display name like Jones and typing it over. If you want to do this for a single user, it's as simple as saying set MSOL user password, give it the user principal name, their new password, and out null. Now in this case, Ziggy Smith is yet another test user, so we're going to change his password as well. Now, so far our demo has been with single users, but in reality, you're going to be doing this for multiple people. So I've got an Excel file that's got about 20 users, 19 users, something like that, in a CSV file. So let's import the CSV file, and that way you can take a look and see what I'm working with. So we're going to import CSV. Now, in your case, it might be hundreds, it may be thousands. I've cleared that out just so that we can take a look at import. And I'm going to pipe it through get member. That way you guys can see what it looks like as to what my CSV fields were. So I've got my fields pretty much matching what the command is going to match. And I tend to do this with the CSV files just to make it easier for matching. But they don't necessarily have to if you prefer to name them something else, as long as you're okay matching them later on. Now, what I'm going to do with this CSV file, so I've got first name, last name, display name, title, department, usage location I've already included in there, and the user principal name. We're going to do this line here, which is going to take the CSV. We're going to run it through a for each. That's what the % sign is showing here. And then for each of these, we're going to create a new MSOL user with the user principal name of whatever this is coming into. So the user principal name from the spreadsheet, or from the CSV, the display name, the first name, the last name, title, department, usage location. And I'm going to just output that over to a text file. Right now you'll probably be seeing a lot of red because these users were already created. Which leads me to mentioning that that user principal name is unique for active accounts. And so that's why we're seeing all the red. So let's get rid of those guys. To clean up the users that were coming in through the CSV, we're going to run this remove MSOL user. Now the reason why I want to do a remove is because maybe I accidentally imported users that I shouldn't have. Or maybe we have a bunch of users who got let go today because maybe our company's going through layoffs. Something like that. And then I have this dash force because I don't want to be prompted in this case for each and every person. Again, for demo purposes, Smith and Jones do not exist, so that's why I'm saying dash force, don't prompt me. I'm going to highlight these, and I'm going to run them. Scroll this up. So notice now it's come back. So the users should be gone. But I didn't really want to delete those guys. How many times have you found yourself where you accidentally deleted somebody? You deleted maybe Chris Smith instead of Chris Smith's son. So we're going to take a look at this get MSOL user return deleted users. The beauty of working with Office 365 and accidentally deleting people is that they get sent to the recycle bin. By default, the recycle bin is there for, or the people stay in the recycle bin for 30 days. So you can see all of the Smiths and Jones. That are in the recycle bin. Notice we've got some that are licensed, some that aren't. That doesn't really matter. Now let's say I really want to restore Ziggy Smith. So to restore a single user, you just use this restore MSOL user commandlet. And you tell it which user principal name you want to restore. Now this new user principal name is handy, especially when it comes to having somebody who's been deleted for maybe, say, a little bit of time, somebody else comes in, takes that UPN. Well, now you've got their old UPN in use. So this new user principal name makes it easier to restore them to a new name. So it's just restore MSOL user, the one that you want to restore, and the name you're going to restore it to. So if we pull up that. So now Ziggy Smith is restored, and he's now known as zsmith at Simplex-IT.com. As for the rest of the Smiths, let's say I wanted to do a bulk restore. You just do your get users. In this case, I'm also doing the dash return deleted users. Give me all the Smiths who've been deleted. We want to restore them. So bulk restore, notice as they're getting restored, they're starting to appear here. Okay. Now the Joneses, let's say that I'm done with the Joneses and I want to take them outside of the recycle bin and get rid of them forever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get them from the recycle bin, and then use this remove MSOL user, remove from recycle bin parameter. And then this forces don't prompt me for each one, because I know how many there are in this case, and I know that I want to get rid of them all. I do the force. Only use the force when you know what you're deleting and don't want to be prompted. It can be dangerous otherwise. Something to note, once you use this remove from recycle bin, you can't restore the users. As long as they're in the recycle bin, they can be restored. Alright, so that's it for users. Let's take a look at groups. To look at groups, first thing you want to take a look at is this get MSOL group. This lists all the groups that we have. Now let's just say, all right, there's distribution list, security, and I've worked with some companies that have an immense amount of groups, distribution list, security, or otherwise. So let's say in this case you only care about security. What you do is you'd add the dash group type in security. Now our test group, I have them what I consider a quality group. So we're going to call them, we're going to give them a group. Notice that there's no quality group yet. So use new MSOL group, give it a display name and a description. So it's created the group. Let's scroll this up a little more. Now we're going to store this group into a variable for later, because the thing to note with the group commandlets is that they use the ID fields heavily. I don't know about you guys, but trying to remember a GUID like this one Not for me. I'll store it in a variable, thank you. Alright, so we're storing the group. Now let's add the Joneses. The quality group. Do we have any more Joneses? No. We actually got rid of them. So let's bring in the Smith. So what we're doing is we're taking the collection of Smiths. We are going through them with that %sign. We're going to add them all to this quality group. Again, as I mentioned earlier, the group commandlets are heavy on IDs. So I'm using this .object_ID as the group object. And then the $__.object_ID is for each user. So now that that's done, let's take a look and see who's in that group. The get MSOL group member, you give it the group ID, and that'll tell you the people who are in the group. So you can see that the Smiths are now part of the group. But now let's just say our buddy Ziggy here is moving on to another department, and so he's no longer needed in the quality security group. What you'd find easy to do is store the user in their own variable, because again, ID. We're going to do remove MSL group member, the group ID, the group member type is user, and then the group member object ID, which is the user ID. So I'm going to highlight those and run them. Because Ziggy Jones is no longer there. This guy should actually be Z Smith. So that's what happens when we remove him. And just to make sure that we really removed him, we're going to get MSOL group member again. And Ziggy's not in this list. Alright, now let's say that you're managing groups and you need to change be it their display name or their description. You're going to use this set MSOL group commandlet. Again, you give it the group ID, and then you can tell it either the display name or description. I can say quality assurance and run it. And then just to verify it, let's look at the list again. You'll see that now the display name is QA and the description shows quality assurance. So that's how easy it is to add people to groups. That's how easy it is to change groups. Finally, let's say that we don't need this group anymore, because quality assurance here, we don't need this for this demo. So to get rid of it, it's simply remove MSOL group and the ID field. Again, the group commandlets have heavy on their ID fields. Notice in this case I left off the force just so you can see that these confirmation prompts are there with the removes. Yes. And to verify MSOL group. And you'll see that QA is no longer in this list. So that's working with groups. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint here for a minute. Are there any questions so far? Okay, I'm going to scroll ahead in the slides. So as your slide deck is loading, if you see slides changing, please don't worry. We're moving it forward to where we're at now. One of the commandlets that I did not mention while we were looking at the PowerShell stuff was changing the password policy. If you find yourself needing to change that while you're in PowerShell, it's simply set MSOL password policy with two different parameters. There's the validity period, that is used to specify how long the password is valid, and then there's the notification days parameter. And that's used to tell you guys how many or how long before the user is notified to change your password. So let's say you wanted to make your password valid for 60 days and you want to notify your users 14 days beforehand, then you would set validity period to 60 and notification days to 14. Look at security groups. And our next step is to look at roles. So what we're going to take a look at is we're going to look at the administrative roles. What are they? We're going to take a look at all of the users for a particular role. Then we're going to take a look at all the roles for a particular user. We will add a user to a role. We will remove users from a role. And then our contact information. We'll come back to the contact information, and we're going to take a look at the PowerShell now. Okay, let's take a look at the PowerShell for roles. So the first thing we're going to take a look at and for those who did not see the PowerPoint slides, I just advanced them to where we're at now to cover the roles. So I'm going to start with get MSOL role. This is going to list all of the available roles. And notice these are the various different types of administrator roles. Now you may have various people in your company who need to have access to the different administrative types. So this is where this is going to come into play. So the role that I want to work with right now is the company administrator, which is full access. And I'm going to use, what I'm going to do is I'm going to store the role. You'll see why here in a little bit. Now I'm going to see who all is considered a company administrator. So to do that, I use get MSOL role member, give it the role ID. And now I can see who's part of that and what they do. As you'll notice, there's a test user that's assigned as the company admin. We don't want the test user as an admin. maybe for this case it was just a demo purpose. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the test user from being a company administrator. Maybe in your case you have an employee who is a company admin who no longer needs those rights. This is where this comes into play. It's remove MSOL role member, the role that you want to remove. The role member type is user, and role member email address is test. So if I run that, I get a list of the members again. Test is no longer in that list. But let's say that test was supposed to be there and test really isn't a test. Then I can go ahead and say, well, let's add MSOL role member. Role means company administrator in this case. Role member types user. Role member is email address. Is that. And run it. So now if I look at this list, test is back in the list. Now, I've had some people ask before, can users have multiple roles? Let's take a look and see that. So I'm going to take test back out of the company admin role. I'm going to add role to the billing administrator. So test is going to billing administrator. And it's also going to be a password administrator. Role. They don't have this one, so we will assign it to help desk administrator. So now we can get the role for the user. Get so user role dash user principal name test at Simplex-IT.com. And we can now see, I'm going to scroll this up a little bit more, that test has multiple roles. So when you're dealing with roles, these are the commandlets you're going to be working with. Are the get MSOL role member, the remove, add, and then dealing with the user itself is just get MSOL user role. Are there any questions? So hopefully I've showed you in this amount of time that you can do groups and use the bulk to pipe it over to deal with roles and security, and even from creating users off of a CSV file. Looks like we may have a question here. Okay, so the question we have is, are there any commandlets for getting dates of last logon and last password change of users? The last logon and the last password change. Off of the top of my head, I don't know. Let me... To me, it would seem like it should be a property that's stored somewhere. Let me look into that. and include the response in the blog post about this presentation. Because that would be very handy information. Bob is asking about the get mailbox statistics, if that would serve for you. I don't believe I have the Exchange Online stuff set up here. Let me double check that and see if Bob's get mailbox statistics happens to show that. I'll make note that that might be the solution, and if so, I'll also let you know which module to include. Any other questions? Which IDE am I using? I'm actually using the integrated scripting environment that comes with Windows PowerShell 3. So that's why you're seeing the IntelliSense and all the drop-downs. That's one thing you'll find with any of the demos that I give. I try to use what comes with a package. If there are any add-ons, I'll include more details on that, but in this particular case, I'm using a straight PowerShell 3.0 installation. What you're seeing with my setup is I've got my script window at the top and then the command pane at the bottom, and I've closed the list of commands that appear on the right by default, just because I wanted to save on screen real estate. Well, thank you all for attending. Again, if you have any general feedback on the webinar or want to see any particular topic covered in future webinars, please email Bob. He's bob@simplex-it.com. And if you have any more Office 365 PowerShell questions and want to get more in depth, or even general PowerShell questions, please feel free to email me at sarah@simplex-it.com. Thank you all for coming.